40% more? That can't be right. I blinked at my screen, the numbers refusing to change no matter how many times I refreshed the page. The compensation spreadsheet that Kyle from HR had accidentally shared with the entire finance department instead of just the leadership team glowed on my monitor, each row more devastating than the last. Mason Reeves, 2 years at the company. Base salary, $137,000. Vanessa Lynn, 14 months at the company. Base salary, $134,500. Tristan Adler, 8 months at the company. Base salary, $142,000. All of them trained by me. All of them making almost 40% more than my $98,750 salary after 9 years of building this company's entire financial infrastructure from nothing. The office sounds faded around me. The clicking keyboards, murmured conversations, the hum of the ventilation system that always ran too cold. I scrolled through the document again, my chest tightening when I found my name buried on page 3. Eleanor Avery, 9 years at the company. Base salary, $98,750. 9 years. Countless 60-hour weeks solving impossible equations, finding errors nobody else could see, creating compliance protocols that saved the company millions, training every single person who now earned dramatically more than me. I glanced across the open office at Mason, laughing at something on his screen, probably another cryptocurrency meme. Mason, who still asked me how to properly reconcile accounts payable despite 2 years on the job. Mason, who earned nearly $40,000 more than me. The email recall notice from Kyle came 3 minutes later, but it was too late. I had already downloaded the spreadsheet and saved it to my personal drive. I closed my laptop and walked directly to Daniel Hammond's office, my manager for the past 6 years. I didn't schedule a meeting, didn't send a message, just knocked twice, and entered when he looked up from his desk. Eleanor? Something urgent? He had the audacity to look annoyed at the interruption. I placed my laptop in front of him, open to the spreadsheet. I need to understand this. My voice sounded strange, controlled yet hollow. Daniel's eyes flicked to the screen, then back to me. The slight widening of his pupils told me everything. He knew exactly what I'd found. He closed my laptop and leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Eleanor, you know I can't discuss other employees' compensation. I'm not asking about their compensation. I'm asking about mine. I reopened the laptop. 9 years, Daniel. 9 years building every financial system this company relies on. I trained all of these people who now make 40% more than me. How is that possible? He sighed. That particular sigh manager's perfect to make you feel like you're being unreasonable. The market has changed significantly since you were hired, Eleanor. It's company policy for new market entrants. Your compensation was set in a different economy. So adjust it. It's not that simple. There are bans, structures, policies. He shrugged, actually shrugged at me. Take it or leave it. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. From something else entirely. I'd like to request a formal compensation review. I kept my voice level. I can submit the request, but frankly, it will be denied. We just completed annual reviews last quarter. You received your standard 3% increase. He glanced at his watch. Was there anything else? That night, I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't call my sister Meredith to vent my frustration. Instead, I opened my laptop at my kitchen table and began to write. I'm Ellie, by the way. Eleanor Avery, 34 years old. The kind of person who alphabetizes her spice rack and color codes her closet. The kind of person who's always been told she's detail-oriented and thorough. Corporate code for, we'll pile work on you until you break because you're too responsible to let things fail. Let me pause for a moment. Before I go any further, could you please take a few seconds to tell me in the comments where you are watching from? I want to know my story reached you, wherever you are. And if you've ever felt undervalued, maybe drop a heart or something. Because what I'm about to tell you changed everything for me. And maybe it will for you too. So there I was, sitting at my kitchen table with a glass of grocery store Cabernet, creating the most important document of my career. I started with a simple timeline of my 9 years at the company. 2014, hired as financial analyst. Built the first automated reporting system that eliminated 30 hours of manual work weekly. 2015, promoted to senior analyst. Restructured the accounts receivable process, reducing outstanding collections by 42%. 2016, created tax compliance framework that passed federal audit with 0 findings. First, clean audit in company history. I documented everything. Every crisis I'd averted, every dollar I'd saved, every system I'd built, every person I'd trained who now earned more than me. I worked through the night, fueled by a cold clarity I'd never experienced before. By dawn, I had created a 43-page analysis titled The Cost of Institutional Memory, a comprehensive breakdown of my value to the company. On the final page, I calculated the exact dollar amount I had saved the company in the previous year alone, $267,459. Compared against the adjustment I should have received to bring my salary to market rate, $39,500. The math wasn't complicated. I printed the document and had it professionally bound at a 24-hour copy shop. Then I went home, showered, and dressed in my most expensive outfit, a charcoal pencil, skirt, and cream blouse I'd bought myself after my last promotion 3 years ago. When I arrived at the office, I headed straight for CEO Garrett Wilson's office. His assistant Tara wasn't at her desk yet. It was only 7:15 a.m., so I slipped into his empty office and placed 3 items in the center of his desk. My resignation letter, an offer letter from a competing firm that had been courting me for months, offering $145,000 plus benefits, my leather-bound analysis. Then I went to my desk and began to work as though it were any other day. By 9:30, my phone rang. Garrett's extension. "Eleanor, could you come to my office, please?" His voice was tight. I took my time gathering my notebook and pen, walked deliberately across the office floor where people were already whispering. Word had gotten out about the spreadsheet. I felt their eyes on me but kept my gaze forward. When I entered Garrett's office, I found not just him, but Daniel, Kyle from HR, and Vanessa Chen, the COO. My analysis sat open on Garrett's desk. "Close the door, please, Eleanor," Garrett said. At 57, he had the practiced calm of someone who had never been told no. I remained standing, even when Garrett gestured to the chair. "We've reviewed your document," he began, tapping the leather cover. "I have to say, it's quite thorough." "Thank you." I kept my voice neutral. "There seems to be a misunderstanding about compensation that we should address," Kyle, from HR, interjected, sweating slightly at his hairline. "No misunderstanding," I replied. "I've worked here 9 years. I've trained 5 people who now earn significantly more than me. When I raised the issue, I was told it was company policy. I'm simply making a business decision based on the information provided." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Eleanor, if you had given us time to review your request..." "I did. For 9 years." I turned to face Garrett directly. The final section of my analysis includes a comprehensive knowledge transfer plan. Every process, contact, workaround, and system vulnerability that exists exclusively in my head, organized by department impact. You'll find it quite detailed. Vanessa Chen, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "You've clearly put significant thought into this, Eleanor." "I have." "What would it take for you to reconsider your resignation?" Garrett asked, leaning forward. I had anticipated this question. My market value is clearly established by both your own compensation structure and my competing offer. But this isn't just about money. It's about 9 years of being undervalued despite demonstrable contributions to this company's success. I paused, letting the silence grow uncomfortable. I'd need my salary adjusted to $150,000, retroactive compensation for the past year's disparity as a bonus, and a formal review of compensation practices across the company to address similar inequities. Kyle actually gasped. Daniel looked at his shoes. Garrett studied me for a long moment. "You realize what you're asking is highly unusual. So is building your entire financial infrastructure and training my own replacements at a 40% discount for 9 years. The clock on Garrett's wall ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Outside the glass walls of his office, I could see people pretending not to watch. Finally, Garrett nodded. Give us 24 hours to prepare a formal response. I collected my notebook. My resignation is effective in 2 weeks. The knowledge transfer plan I've outlined requires 60 days minimum. You have 24 hours to decide whether that gap is worth addressing. As I turned to leave, Vanessa spoke again. Eleanor, just out of curiosity, who made you the competing offer? I paused at the door. Horizon Financial Solutions. They're led by Catherine Walsh. I let that hang in the air. Catherine Walsh, who had famously left this very company 5 years ago after experiencing the same treatment I had. Catherine Walsh, who had since built a competitor that had been stealing our clients for the past 2 years. The look on their faces told me they finally understood what they were about to lose. I walked back to my desk, heart pounding but steps steady. I could feel the shift in power vibrating through the air around me. For the first time in 9 years, I wasn't just Eleanor, the reliable financial architect. I was Eleanor, the force to be reckoned with. And they knew it. As I sat down at my desk, my phone lit up with a text from Catherine. Did you do it? I typed back a single word. Yes. Her reply came instantly. Their loss. Our gain. Dinner tonight to celebrate? I smiled as I set my phone down. The real victory wasn't just standing up for myself after 9 years of undervaluation. It was what was coming next. Because the secret I hadn't included in my analysis was the most valuable of all. I set my phone down and looked around the office that had been my second home for nearly a decade. The faint smell of burnt coffee from the break room. The uneven hum of the air conditioning. The view of the city skyline I'd watched grow with new buildings year after year, all so familiar yet suddenly different. My computer pinged with an incoming message. It was from Jordan in accounts receivable. What's happening? Everyone's saying you quit? News travels fast in an office designed for eavesdropping. I minimized the message without responding and instead pulled up the file I'd been working on for months. Not my analysis, something else entirely. When I said I'd documented everything in those 9 years, I meant everything. The first irregular transaction had caught my eye 18 months earlier. A vendor payment that didn't match any approved purchase order. Small enough to fly under the radar, $13,875 to a consulting firm I'd never heard of. I flagged it to Daniel, who dismissed it as pre-approved by executive leadership. The same response I got when I flagged the next one. And the next. After the third dismissal, I started keeping a separate log. Transactions with no supporting documentation. Vendors with post office box addresses and no websites. Payments that occurred like clockwork each quarter, growing slightly each time. By month 6 of my secret accounting, the pattern was unmistakable. Someone was siphoning company funds through fake vendor accounts. The amounts were calculated precisely to avoid triggering audit thresholds, starting small and growing just enough each quarter to establish a pattern that wouldn't raise flags if normalized against our growing revenue. It was elegant, really. A financial ghost operation that had diverted over $2.7 million in the past 3 years. This was the document Catherine really wanted. This was why she'd been courting me for months, offering a salary that actually reflected my worth. Because she suspected what I'd confirmed. Our company's pristine financial image was built on carefully constructed fraud. My desk phone rang, startling me. Daniel's extension. Eleanor, can you come to the conference room? We'd like to continue our conversation. 3 hours. They'd only needed 3 hours, not 24. I'll be right there. When I entered the Pine Room, our company named conference rooms after trees. How original. I found Garrett, Daniel, Vanessa, and now Thomas Whitaker, our chief legal counsel. Interesting addition. Please, sit. Garrett gestured to the empty chair across from him. He looked like he hadn't slept, though it was barely afternoon. I sat, placing my notebook and pen precisely in front of me. We've reviewed your requests, Garrett began, and we're prepared to offer you a revised compensation package. Thomas slid a document across the table. I took my time reading it, aware of 4 sets of eyes watching me. Salary adjustment to $155,000, effective immediately. a retention bonus of $45,000, a new title, Senior Director of Financial Operations, a seat on the Executive Leadership Committee, everything I'd asked for and more. The desperate counterattack of people who suddenly realized exactly how vulnerable they were. I closed the document and looked up. This is acceptable. Thank you. The visible relief that washed over Daniel's face was almost comical. Wonderful. Garrett smiled tightly. Thomas will work with HR to expedite the paperwork. We're very pleased we could resolve this matter internally. I nodded, gathering my things to leave, when Thomas cleared his throat. Just one additional matter, Eleanor. As part of this new arrangement, we've prepared a standard confidentiality agreement regarding company compensation structures and any irregularities you may have observed during your tenure. And there it was. I turned to Thomas, my expression neutral. Irregularities? Thomas maintained his practice lawyer poker face. Standard language for executive agreements. Nothing of concern. I let the silence hang for 3 full seconds before responding. I'll need to review that language carefully before signing. Would you mind emailing it to me? Of course, Thomas nodded, though a muscle in his jaw twitched. I stood to leave but paused at the door. One more thing. I'd like written confirmation that the compensation review for other potentially affected employees will begin within 30 days, as we discussed. Vanessa and Garrett exchanged glances. We'll include that in the documentation, Vanessa finally said. I nodded and left, feeling their eyes burning into my back as I walked across the office to my desk. My phone buzzed with another text from Catherine. Update? I typed, counteroffer accepted. They're including an NDA about irregularities. Her response came quickly. Perfect. Proceed as planned. The next 2 weeks were fascinating. I was suddenly included in executive meetings I'd previously only prepared materials for. People who had barely nodded at me in the hallway now stopped to chat. Daniel brought me coffee. Black, no sugar, just how I liked it, without being asked. I signed their revised offer letter but kept finding concerns with the confidentiality agreement, sending it back to legal with questions that required careful rewording. A delaying tactic Catherine had suggested. The document isn't legally problematic. I explained to my sister Meredith over dinner that weekend. I'm just buying time. Meredith shook her head, twirling pasta around her fork. I still can't believe you're doing this. The old Ellie would have just taken the money and been grateful. I set down my wine glass. The old Ellie let herself be undervalued for 9 years. The new Ellie understands her worth. And the new Ellie is kind of terrifying. Meredith laughed. I love it. For those wondering what happened, because I know you're wondering, let me be clear. I didn't break any laws. I didn't steal company secrets. I didn't sabotage systems. What I did was much more effective. On day 15 after my confrontation, one day after my resignation would have taken effect, I sat across from Garrett, Daniel, Vanessa, and Thomas again. This time we were joined by Amara Jackson, the chair of the board of directors, connecting via video conference. Eleanor, thank you for your patience as we've worked through the details of your new role, Garrett began, smiling that CEO smile that never quite reached his eyes. Before we finalize everything, there's something I need to share with all of you, I said, pulling a slim folder from my bag. We've already approved your requests, Daniel interjected quickly. This isn't about my compensation. I opened the folder and distributed copies of a 15-page document to everyone at the table, sending the digital version to Amara. This is about the $2.7 million that's been systematically diverted from the company through fake vendor accounts over the past 3 years. The room went completely silent. On the screen, Amara leaned forward, eyes narrowing as she scanned the document. I've detailed the transaction patterns, the shell companies involved, and traced the funds to their final destination. I kept my voice calm, professional. I initially flagged these inconsistencies to Daniel 18 months ago, but was told they were approved at the executive level. All eyes turned to Daniel, whose face had gone ashen. There must be some mistake, he stammered. No mistake, I continued. I verified every transaction. The pattern became clear after tracking the first dozen payments. What wasn't clear was who was behind it. I turned to page 12 of my report. The money was carefully dispersed across 7 different LLC entities, all of which trace back to a holding company called Pinewood Ventures. I paused. A holding company registered to Thomas Whitaker's brother-in-law. Thomas's expression didn't change, but his knuckles went white, where his hands gripped the table. "This is absurd," he said evenly. "I've never heard of Pinewood Ventures." "Perhaps not by name," I agreed. "But the signature authorizing the formation documents matches the signature on your marriage certificate to Claire Whitaker, née Peterson. Your brother-in-law, Jordan Peterson, signed both." On the screen, Amara's voice cut through the tension. "Ms. Avery, these are extremely serious allegations. Why bring this to us rather than the authorities?" I met her gaze through the camera. "Because I believe in giving this company the opportunity to address the situation internally first. The fraud has been sophisticated but contained. It appears to involve only a small number of individuals, not systemic corruption." What I didn't say was that Catherine had advised this approach. "Let them think you're doing them a favor," she'd told me. "Give them just enough rope to hang themselves." "I'll need to call in our outside counsel," Amara said, already reaching for her phone. Thomas stood abruptly. "This meeting is over until legal representation for all parties is present." "Sit down, Thomas," Garrett said quietly, his eyes never leaving the documents in front of him. "Eleanor, how long have you been compiling this information?" 18 months, since the first time I reported an irregular payment and was ignored." Daniel looked like he might be sick. "I didn't. I never." "You never asked questions," I finished for him. "You never investigated when I raised concerns. You trusted the wrong people and dismissed the right ones." The next 8 hours were a blur of emergency board calls, outside counsel arriving, security escorting Thomas from the building, and forensic accountants being brought in. I answered questions calmly, provided all my documentation, and watched as the company I'd given 9 years to grappled with the betrayal of its trusted legal counsel. By midnight, it was clear that Thomas had been the architect of the scheme, with 2 accomplices in the accounting department who had helped process the fraudulent payments. Daniel hadn't been complicit, just negligent and too trusting of Thomas, who had assured him the payments were legitimate, executive-approved consultancy fees. I left the building at 1:17 in the midnight, exhausted but eerily calm. Catherine was waiting in her car across the street. "How did it go?" she asked as I slid into the passenger seat. "Exactly as you predicted. Thomas is finished. The board is in panic mode. Garrett and Vanessa are scrambling to contain the damage." Catherine smiled in the darkness. "And you?" "I start as your new chief financial officer next month, as agreed, with a signing bonus matching what they embezzled from their own company." I leaned back against the headrest. "But first, I'm taking 3 weeks off. I haven't had a real vacation in 9 years." What happened after that? Well, that's when things got really interesting. The company tried to keep the embezzlement quiet, but these things have a way of getting out. Within days, Thomas and his accomplices were facing criminal charges. Daniel was placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation into his oversight failures. The board brought in an independent firm to conduct a complete audit of all financial systems I had built and knew inside and out. 2 days before I was set to start my new role at Catherine's company, Garrett called me personally. "Eleanor, I'm hoping we can talk." His voice had lost that CEO confidence. "The audit team is struggling with some of the systems you designed. They're finding it challenging to understand your methodology." I almost laughed. "My methodology is fully documented in the knowledge transfer plan I provided. The one you ignored when you thought you could simply pay me to stay quiet. We're prepared to offer you a consulting fee to assist with the transition. Name your price." "My price?" I echoed. My price was being valued fairly for 9 years of loyalty and expertise. That opportunity has passed. I hung up and blocked his number. When I walked into Catherine's office on my first day as CFO, she greeted me with a glass of champagne. "To new beginnings," she toasted. "And to knowing your worth," I added. Within 6 months, we had secured 3 major clients who had left my former company due to concerns about their financial controls. Within a year, our firm had doubled in size and was recognized as an industry leader in transparent financial practices. I implemented a company-wide transparent compensation structure that ensured equal pay for equal work, regardless of when someone was hired. Every quarter, I personally reviewed salary data to identify and correct any emerging disparities. As for my former employer, they survived, but never fully recovered from the scandal. Garrett was eventually removed by the board. Vanessa left for a position at a smaller firm. Daniel was demarcated to a non-management role after the investigation concluded he had been negligent but not criminal. The company was acquired 2 years later at a fraction of its previous valuation. Sometimes I wonder if things would have been different had they simply valued me properly from the beginning. If Daniel had investigated when I first raised concerns about irregular payments. If Garrett had built a culture of transparency rather than secrecy. But I don't wonder for long, because the truth is, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. So if you're watching this and feeling undervalued, overlooked, or taken for granted, whether at work, in a relationship, or anywhere else in your life, remember my story. Remember that knowing your worth isn't selfish. It's necessary. Your institutional knowledge, your dedication, your skills, they all have value. Real, tangible value. And sometimes, you have to be the one to calculate that value and present the bill. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share in the comments if you've ever had to stand up for your worth. I read every comment and would love to hear your experiences. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, share this video with them. Because in the end, the most powerful thing you can do isn't seeking revenge. It's recognizing your true value and refusing to accept anything less.